My journey as an entrepreneur wasn't one that started with a light bulb moment or a sudden realization of a great idea. In fact, it all began with a much smaller, more grounded ambition, the desire to make something of myself. A lot of people will tell you that being an entrepreneur is all about pursuing your passion or finding that big, innovative idea. But for me, it was about survival, grit, and a willingness to keep going even when it felt like everything was falling apart. I grew up in a small town where the odds of making it big were about as slim as winning the lottery. My family wasn't rich, and my parents didn't have the connections or resources that could open doors for me. In fact, my parents worked long hours just to make ends meet. My dad was a mechanic, and my mom worked as a nurse. The idea of starting a business was something that seemed almost laughable. After high school, I didn't go straight to college. I couldn't afford it, and truth be told, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do with my life. I took a few odd jobs to get by, waiting tables, delivering pizzas, and working at a local warehouse. The grind was exhausting, and though I never minded working hard, I knew I didn't want to spend my entire life clocking in and out for someone else. But at that point, I didn't know what other option I had. One day, I was talking to a guy I knew from my warehouse job. His name was Greg, and he was one of those guys who always seemed to have an idea. He talked about starting a small business, not something flashy, just something that would give him the freedom to live life on his terms. He had a little money saved up, and he was planning to buy a used van and start a moving company. Greg wasn't some mastermind. He didn't have a fancy degree or rich relatives. He was just someone who believed that working for himself was the way to go. That conversation stayed with me for a long time. It felt like a small seed being planted in my mind, a thought I couldn't shake. Greg wasn't necessarily smarter than me, and he certainly didn't have more experience, but he had something I didn't, the guts to try. At first, the idea of starting a business felt overwhelming. I had no idea where to start, how to get funding, or what kind of business would work. But I also knew I couldn't keep working these dead-end jobs forever. So, I started researching. I spent hours reading articles, watching YouTube videos, and listening to podcasts about entrepreneurship. I learned about business plans, marketing strategies, and customer acquisition. There was so much information, and I didn't know how to absorb it all at once. But every time I learned something new, it felt like a small victory. After a few months of researching, I came up with a plan. I had no money, but I had a beat-up old car and a few tools. I decided I would start a small, mobile car detailing business. It wasn't glamorous, but I figured it was something I could do with minimal upfront investment, and it was a service that people would always need. I could do it on the side while keeping my day job, and if things went well, I could eventually scale up. The first step was finding clients. I went door to door, knocking on houses and talking to people about offering them a professional car detailing service. At first, it was incredibly awkward. Most people didn't take me seriously. They'd look at me like I was some kid trying to hustle them for money. But I kept at it. Slowly but surely, I started getting my first customers. I would wash and wax cars in their driveways, often in the blazing sun or freezing cold. I wasn't making much money, but the more I did it, the more I learned about running a business. I learned about customer service, pricing strategies, and how to make a lasting impression. The turning point came when I decided to create a website for my business. I had no idea how to build one, so I watched tutorials, read about SEO, and taught myself the basics. The website was simple but professional looking, and soon enough, it started showing up on Google when people searched for local car detailing services. I started getting calls, and for the first time, I realized that there was real potential here. By now, I had saved enough money to invest in better equipment, a powerful pressure washer, professional-grade cleaning products, and a better vehicle to transport everything. I also took a small loan from a family member to help cover the expenses. With the right equipment and a growing customer base, my business began to take off. But it wasn't all smooth sailing. There were plenty of setbacks along the way. I remember a time when I hired a guy to help me with the workload. He seemed like a great fit at first, but he turned out to be unreliable. I had to fire him after a month, and it set me back both financially and emotionally. There were times when I wondered if I was in over my head. I felt like I was constantly running on fumes, balancing customer demands, managing the business, and still working a full-time job. But I kept pushing forward. I began building a brand, offering packages, creating promotions, and building relationships with loyal customers. Word of mouth started spreading, and soon I had more business than I could handle. That's when I made the decision to quit my day job and go all in. The next few years were a blur. I expanded my team, rented a small garage for operations, and started offering new services. I went from doing everything myself to managing a team of 5 full-time employees. I even hired a marketing consultant to help me grow my brand even further. Every step of the way, I learned something new about managing people, handling finances, and scaling a business. Eventually, after about 5 years of relentless work, my small mobile car detailing business grew into a well-established local brand with multiple locations. We weren't just washing cars anymore. We were offering a range of services from detailing to repairs and even some high-end custom work. I still pinch myself sometimes, thinking about how far I've come. There were so many times I wanted to give up, so many nights I spent staring at the ceiling wondering if it was all worth it. But in the end, it was. Being an entrepreneur is hard. It's exhausting. But it's also one of the most rewarding things I've ever done. I've had to make tough decisions, face failure, and fight through self-doubt. But the most important thing I've learned is this: the journey is never linear. There's no one-size-fits-all approach to success. What worked for me won't work for everyone. But if you're willing to put in the work, learn from your mistakes, and never quit, anything is possible. Now, looking back at that moment when Greg and I first talked about starting a business, I'm grateful. It wasn't some big, inspirational speech that changed my life. It was a simple conversation that planted the seed. And while I may not have had all the answers then, I now understand that it's not about knowing everything at the start. It's about being willing to learn, grow, and adapt as you go. And so, here I am, still learning, still growing, and still pushing forward. Every challenge I face, every setback I encounter, it only makes me more determined. I may not be rich, but I'm rich in experience, and that's something I can't put a price on. If you enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to the channel. It helps the content grow and motivates me to create even more great videos. Turn on notifications so you don't miss any new uploads. By the way, I'm curious, when do you usually watch my videos? While working, studying, or just relaxing at home? Let me know in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Thank you for your support. I was 23 when I decided to leave my dead-end job and start my own business. I had no real plan, just an idea that had been swirling around in my head for months. I was working as a sales associate at a department store in a small town, and I hated every minute of it. The customers were rude, the management was toxic, and the pay was terrible. I felt stuck, like I was slowly wasting my life away. I had always dreamed of being an entrepreneur, of owning a business, but I didn't know how to make it happen. One night, after another awful shift, I was venting to my best friend, Amanda, about how miserable I was. She told me I should just go for it, that I shouldn't wait for the perfect time, because that would never come. Her words stuck with me. I couldn't shake the feeling that I was meant for something bigger, something different. I wanted to create something of my own. I spent the next few weeks thinking about it. I had always been interested in fitness and health, and I loved working out. I thought, why not turn that passion into a business? I could open a fitness studio, offering personal training, group classes, and health coaching. I had no experience running a business, but I figured I could learn as I went along. The more I thought about it, the more excited I became. The idea felt right. The first thing I did was start researching. I spent hours on Google, reading articles about starting a business, understanding legal requirements, and looking into the cost of opening a gym. I also reached out to local fitness trainers to ask about their experiences. Most of them were supportive, but a few were skeptical. They warned me that the fitness industry was saturated and that I would be competing with bigger, more established gyms. But I wasn't deterred. I knew I had to carve out my own niche. I needed money to get started, though, and that was the biggest obstacle. I had saved up about $5,000 from my retail job, but I knew it wouldn't be enough to cover everything. So I started brainstorming ways to raise more funds. I thought about asking my parents for a loan, but I didn't want to risk putting them in a difficult position. I considered taking out a small business loan, but I was worried about taking on debt at such a young age with no real income to back it up. One day, I was scrolling through Facebook when I saw an ad for a crowdfunding platform. It seemed like a long shot, but I figured I had nothing to lose. I created a campaign, wrote a heartfelt message about why I wanted to start a fitness studio, and shared it with my friends and family. To my surprise, people actually donated. I raised enough money to cover the initial cost of renting a space, buying equipment, and hiring a few trainers. I couldn't believe it. Now came the hard part, actually starting the business. I found a small, affordable location in a strip mall on the outskirts of town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was within my budget, and it had the space I needed. I signed the lease and started getting to work. I spent every free minute painting walls, assembling gym equipment, and creating a website. I also put up flyers and started advertising on social media. At this point, I had no clients and no reputation. It was just me, a couple of trainers I had hired, and a dream. The first few weeks were tough. I had a few clients, but not enough to cover the rent or pay my trainers. I was exhausted from working 16-hour days, trying to juggle marketing, sales, and the actual operations of the gym. I felt like I was always one step away from failure. But I refused to give up. I kept pushing, kept promoting, and kept learning. I spent hours reading about marketing strategies, talking to other business owners, and tweaking my business model. Slowly but surely, things started to improve. Word of mouth spread, and I started to get more clients. I offered discounts for referrals, hosted free classes, and gave away branded merchandise to create buzz. I also started focusing on building relationships with my clients, asking for feedback, and incorporating their suggestions into my offerings. This helped me create a more personalized experience for everyone who walked through my doors. After a few months, the business was finally breaking even. It wasn't making a huge profit, but I was no longer losing money. I was able to pay myself a small salary and give my trainers more hours. I also started to hire additional staff to help with the growing demand. As the business grew, so did my confidence. I began to see the fruits of my labor and realized that all the sleepless nights and stressful moments were worth it. But even though things were going well, I still had my doubts. The fitness industry was competitive, and I knew that if I didn't keep innovating, my business could easily become obsolete. So, I started thinking about new ways to stand out. I decided to introduce online training programs and virtual fitness classes. This would allow me to expand beyond the local community and reach people all over the world. It was a big risk, but I was determined to keep pushing myself. The online programs were a huge success. I invested in creating professional videos and an app where clients could track their workouts and progress. I also started offering personalized coaching for people who couldn't make it to the gym. This new revenue stream helped me scale the business even further. I was able to hire more trainers and build a team of people who shared my passion for health and fitness. A year and a half after opening the studio, I was able to open a second location in a more affluent area of town. The business was growing faster than I could have imagined. But even as the business grew, I never lost sight of what had gotten me here, the passion for helping people and the drive to build something meaningful. It hasn't been easy, and there have been plenty of setbacks along the way. There have been moments when I questioned whether I was doing the right thing or if I was just chasing a pipe dream. But looking back now, I can see how much I've grown. I've learned more than I ever could have imagined, not just about business but about myself. Today, my fitness business is thriving. We have 2 locations, a successful online platform, and a dedicated team of trainers and staff. I'm able to support myself and my family, and I've finally achieved the financial freedom I once dreamed about. But the best part is knowing that I'm making a real difference in people's lives. Every time a client tells me that I've helped them achieve their fitness goals, it reminds me why I started this journey in the first place. If you're reading this and thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple: just do it. It won't be easy, and it will test you in ways you never imagined, but it's worth it. Take the leap, even if you're scared. There will always be challenges, but with persistence and passion, you can overcome them. Don't wait for the perfect time. There is no such thing. The time is now. I never expected to be an entrepreneur. In fact, the whole idea of owning a business seemed like something for people with far more experience and knowledge than me. I was a regular guy, fresh out of college, working a corporate job I hated, trying to figure out what I actually wanted to do with my life. But like a lot of people, the circumstances of my life led me to a place where I had no choice but to start my own venture. And in the end, that turned out to be the best decision I ever made. It all started with a seemingly innocuous problem. I was working as a project manager for a tech startup in San Francisco, and while I was getting a decent paycheck, I felt unfulfilled. The company was growing quickly, and everyone was constantly busy, but nobody was really passionate about what we were doing. We were just pushing out product after product with no real connection to the end users, just trying to hit deadlines and raise the next round of funding. I was burned out. One day, I was walking home from work, scrolling through my phone, when I came across an article about people using personal planners to organize their lives. It wasn't the article itself that caught my attention, but a comment on it. Someone mentioned how they had been searching for a specific type of planner, something that was customizable, with sections that could be moved around based on the user's needs, but they couldn't find anything on the market that matched what they wanted. That comment stuck with me. I had never been particularly into planners or organizing my day in any significant way, but I was a person who loved a challenge, and this sounded like a problem that needed solving. So, for some reason, I decided to look into it further. I spent a couple of hours that night researching planners and organizational tools. What I found was a huge gap in the market. While there were plenty of planners, none of them seemed designed for people with a unique, dynamic lifestyle, people who needed flexibility in their daily planning. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that this could be my opportunity to create something. I could design a customizable planner that didn't just serve as a way to track your appointments, but also as a tool for personal development, productivity, and mental health. Something that people would genuinely use every day and actually look forward to using. I'll admit, I didn't know anything about product design, manufacturing, or how to run a business, but I was determined to learn. I started by sketching out some ideas and doing basic market research. I reached out to friends and family to see if this was something that they would use. The feedback was positive, and I started to feel like I might actually be onto something. I decided to take the plunge. I put in my notice at my corporate job, much to the confusion of my friends and family, who all thought I was crazy. But I had made up my mind. I was going to make this planner happen. The next few months were brutal. I knew nothing about product development, so I had to teach myself from the ground up. I watched countless YouTube videos, read books, and joined online forums to get a sense of how to design a product. My first attempts were embarrassingly bad. I tried to design the planner myself using free software, but it looked like something a high schooler would put together for a class project. I quickly realized that I needed help. I hired a freelance graphic designer to help me turn my idea into something that looked professional. After months of back and forth, redesigns, and tweaks, we finally had a prototype. The next step was finding a manufacturer. Again, I had no idea what I was doing, so I spent hours researching factories and suppliers. After much trial and error, I finally found a small company in China that was willing to take on the project. They weren't the cheapest option, but they had great reviews and seemed to understand what I wanted. When the first batch of planners arrived, I was over the moon. They were real. They existed. My idea was no longer just a concept in my head. I had a physical product in my hands, and I was ready to sell it. But of course, that wasn't the end of the journey. The next challenge was marketing. I didn't have much of a budget, and I knew I needed to get creative. I started by setting up a simple website and an Instagram account. I shared pictures of the planner, wrote blog posts about productivity and self-improvement, and tried to engage with anyone who seemed interested in what I was doing. I reached out to bloggers and influencers, offering them free planners in exchange for reviews. Slowly but surely, the word began to spread. In the first few months, sales were slow. Really slow. I didn't have a huge following, and the market was saturated with competing products. But I kept at it, tweaking my approach, experimenting with different marketing strategies, and constantly improving the product. Eventually, things started to pick up. The positive reviews started coming in, and more people began sharing the product on social media. The planners started gaining traction, and my little side hustle began to turn into a real business. The next hurdle was scaling. As the business grew, I needed to hire help. I brought on a small team to handle customer service, marketing, and logistics. I learned a lot about management, leadership, and the importance of creating a great company culture. I also had to make tough decisions about pricing, product development, and expansion. By the time I had been in business for 2 years, I had turned my small side project into a company with a solid customer base and a team of 10 employees. We were selling planners all over the world, and I had expanded our product line to include accessories like stickers, pins, and specialized notebook inserts. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. I'm still amazed at the journey I've been on. There were so many times when I thought about giving up, when the challenges seemed insurmountable and I was tempted to just go back to the comfort of my old job. But I kept pushing forward, and now I'm living a life I never thought possible. I wake up every day excited about the work I do, and I'm grateful for the opportunity to make a difference in people's lives. It wasn't easy. There were mistakes, failures, and moments of doubt. But I've learned that being an entrepreneur isn't about never failing. It's about being resilient in the face of failure. It's about embracing uncertainty and taking risks, even when the odds are stacked against you. If you're thinking about starting your own business, my advice is simple. Don't wait for the perfect moment. The truth is, there is no such thing as the perfect time. You'll never have everything figured out, and you'll never feel fully prepared. But if you have a passion for something, and you're willing to put in the work, you can make it happen. Just take that first step, and keep moving forward, even when it feels like everything is against you. I'm proof that it's possible to turn a simple idea into a thriving business, and I wouldn't trade this journey for anything. The lessons I've learned along the way have shaped me into a person I'm proud to be, and I know the best is still yet to come. How I went from a $2,000 loan to a $10 million business in 5 years. I've been meaning to share my story for a while now. It's not a success story where everything magically works out, but rather one full of lessons, sleepless nights, and real hustle. I hope it inspires someone who's just starting out, or even those who've been trying and failing, like I was for the longest time. 5 years ago, I was sitting at my kitchen table, staring at a pile of overdue bills and a credit card balance that was nearly maxed out. I was 28, working a dead-end job, living paycheck to paycheck. I had no formal business education, no rich uncle, and honestly, not much hope for the future. The most I had to my name was a pile of books I never read and a few ideas that sounded good at the time. It all started when I decided I needed a change. I had been working as a marketing assistant for an e-commerce company. I had learned a lot on the job, from SEO to paid advertising to social media management. But I wasn't getting anywhere. I could tell the company wasn't going to promote me anytime soon, and every day felt like I was just another cog in the machine. I wanted to build something of my own. One night, after a particularly grueling day, I had this random thought. What if I could create my own e-commerce store? I mean, how hard could it be? I knew a thing or two about online marketing. I had seen so many people making money online. Surely, I could do the same. I started researching. I looked up everything I could find on starting an online store, and then dove into learning about product sourcing, dropshipping, and website building. It was overwhelming, but there was this weird mix of excitement and fear that kept me going. I didn't want to just sit and dream about something better. I wanted to make it happen. I decided to take the leap. But I didn't have much money to put into it. I was already in debt, so I took out a small loan for $2,000. The idea was to use that money to set up my website, buy a few products, and run some ads. At the time, $2,000 felt like the world, but I knew it was my shot. I used the loan to pay for a basic Shopify subscription and buy a small batch of products from a supplier I found online. I wasn't sure about the products, but I chose a niche I felt somewhat passionate about: eco-friendly products. Specifically, reusable water bottles, straws, and sustainable bags. This was 2019, and eco-consciousness was starting to grow in popularity. I spent the next 2 weeks building my website. It wasn't perfect, but it was functional. I wrote all the product descriptions, created basic branding, and launched my first ads. I remember feeling like I had just entered the unknown, with no clear idea of what would happen next. At first, nothing happened. I didn't make a single sale for the first month. My ads weren't converting, and I was starting to feel like I had wasted my time. But I refused to quit. I kept tweaking my ads, experimenting with different copy and targeting, and I kept learning. After a couple of weeks of trial and error, I finally had a breakthrough. I managed to get a single sale, and then another, and then more. The first $100 I made felt like a victory. It wasn't much, but it was proof that this could work. It wasn't long before my $2,000 loan was paid off, and I was reinvesting every dollar I made into growing the business. The next couple of years were a roller coaster. I went through phases of extreme doubt and frustration, where sales would dip and I'd question everything. But I learned quickly. I studied my analytics obsessively, figured out which products were selling, and refined my ad strategies. I started scaling slowly, focusing on building a strong brand and customer base. I also realized the importance of providing great customer service. There were times when I had customers demanding refunds or complaining about shipping delays. I was dropshipping, so I didn't always have control over that. But I learned to handle these situations with care and empathy. I started offering personalized notes to customers, throwing in free samples of new products, and getting ahead of potential issues before they became big problems. Word of mouth started helping me out, and before I knew it, my store was gaining traction. The turning point came when I decided to stop dropshipping and order products in bulk. I was finally confident enough to take that risk. I found a reputable supplier who could handle larger orders, and I started stocking up on products. This allowed me to control my margins better, offer faster shipping, and increase the quality of my brand. By the middle of 2020, my business was generating six figures in revenue, and I had quit my job. I felt like I had finally built something real. But that's when the next set of challenges hit. As my business grew, I had to learn how to manage a team, deal with inventory, and handle increasing customer demands. It was a huge learning curve, but I had no choice but to adapt. I hired my first employee, a customer service rep, and then a part-time social media manager. I expanded my product line, introduced eco-friendly skincare, and even started offering eco-conscious home goods. I created more educational content around sustainability and eco-living, which helped build my brand and connect with my audience. By the end of 2021, my company had reached $2 million in sales, and I knew I had something bigger than just a side hustle. In 2022, I invested in building a warehouse to manage inventory and started working with influencers to promote my products. We hit $5 million in sales that year. In 2023, my business reached $10 million. We had expanded into international markets, and my brand was recognized as one of the leading eco-conscious brands online. I hired a full team of marketing experts, product managers, and customer support agents. What started as a small e-commerce store in my kitchen was now a full-fledged company with multiple employees, a solid customer base, and a thriving social media presence. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. The journey was long, exhausting, and full of failure. I made so many mistakes that cost me time, money, and energy. But each failure taught me something valuable. Each setback was an opportunity to improve. And I'm still learning, still growing, and still figuring out how to scale even further. So, if you're thinking about starting a business, my advice is simple. Don't wait for the perfect moment, because it doesn't exist. Start with what you have, learn along the way, and keep pushing through the tough times. The road won't be easy, but if you stay persistent and willing to adapt, you can make something incredible happen. I didn't have any special connections, but I had a vision, determination, and a willingness to fail over and over again. If I can do it, so can you. I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur. In fact, I had zero plans to even start a business. The idea of dealing with spreadsheets, finances, and employees was terrifying. But here I am, 6 years later, running a company I built from the ground up. Let me tell you how I got here, because if someone like me can do it, I'm sure there's hope for anyone. It all started back in college. I was studying graphic design, and although I loved the creative side of it, I wasn't really sure how to turn it into a career. I had the typical student life, working part-time jobs, scraping by, and spending most of my time trying to figure out what I was going to do after graduation. I had a knack for design and loved playing around with branding and visual concepts, but I never saw it as something that could actually make me money. I thought I'd end up working for a design agency or a corporate brand. I wanted stability, and for a while, that seemed like the safe bet. Then, one summer during my second year, I got a random gig. A local coffee shop needed help with some flyers and social media graphics. They were a small business and didn't have a budget for a full-time designer, but I gave them a good deal. In return, they spread the word about me, and suddenly, I was getting more inquiries. It was just word of mouth, but it was enough to make me realize I could do something bigger with this skill. Still, I didn't know what that something would be. I didn't even think about it seriously until a friend of mine asked me to help her with a project. She wanted to start a small e-commerce store, selling handmade jewelry, and she needed help branding it. I did her logo, her website design, and a little social media work for free in exchange for some exposure. That project took off, and her sales grew. She told me that if I had more time to dedicate to design, I could make a real business out of it. It was that push I needed. After that, I went into full hustle mode. I started designing websites for local businesses and freelancers, slowly building up a client base. But it wasn't easy. There were long nights of learning, trial and error, and getting rejected by clients who didn't think my work was good enough. And trust me, those rejections stung. But something kept me going. I learned that if I wanted to make this into something sustainable, I had to treat it like a business. So I started taking courses on marketing, business development, and client relations. I read books on entrepreneurship and made a point to surround myself with people who had already made the jump into running their own businesses. It was eye-opening. I learned more about managing clients, creating contracts, setting up payment systems, and probably most importantly, how to talk about my services with confidence. In 2018, I took a big step. I quit my part-time job and decided to go full-time with my design business. I didn't have much saved up, but I figured I could make it work. I was terrified, but also excited. It felt like the first time I was truly betting on myself. The first few months were rough. I still hadn't figured out how to consistently find clients, and I often felt like I was spinning my wheels. The money was inconsistent, and I had no idea if I was even pricing my work right. But I kept learning. I started reaching out to more businesses, I cold called, and I worked on improving my portfolio. Slowly, I found a rhythm, and word started to spread about my work. I started getting referrals, which was a game changer. It was then that I realized the power of networking and building relationships. A big turning point came in 2019. One of my biggest clients reached out to me with an opportunity that would change everything. They were a small e-commerce startup that needed a full rebrand, a new website, and some marketing collateral. This was the kind of project I'd been dreaming of, but I was terrified. I knew I wasn't fully equipped for such a large task, but I had to push myself. I agreed, and honestly, I was learning on the go. I hired some freelance help and brought in a web developer I trusted. We worked our butts off, and in the end, the client was thrilled. Their sales increased by 50% in the first month after the rebrand, and they became one of my best clients. That success was the momentum I needed to start thinking bigger. I started building a team of contractors, designers, copywriters, developers, and gradually took on larger projects. But I wasn't prepared for how challenging managing a team would be. I had always worked solo, so dealing with freelancers, balancing schedules, and maintaining the quality of work felt overwhelming at times. It took a lot of trial and error, but I eventually learned how to delegate effectively, set clear expectations, and communicate with my team. As my business grew, so did the pressure. It became clear that I needed to focus not just on design, but also on operations. I had to learn to manage finances, taxes, legal stuff, everything I never thought I'd have to deal with. But I kept pushing forward, learning from every mistake. One of the biggest lessons I've learned is that failure isn't the end. It's just another step toward figuring things out. By 2021, my business was stable, and I had a small team working with me. The idea of entrepreneurship went from this scary unknown to something that felt manageable. The hustle was still there, but it wasn't as chaotic. I had systems in place, and the company was growing. We were no longer just offering design services. We were now providing full branding, digital marketing, and web development solutions. Now, in 2023, I've reached a place where I'm able to step back from the day-to-day grind. My company is doing well, and I've built a network of amazing clients who trust us with their brands. I've also started mentoring other young entrepreneurs, which has been incredibly fulfilling. Looking back, I never would have thought I'd end up here. The thought of running a business seemed impossible when I first started. But taking small steps, being willing to learn, and most importantly, believing in myself was the key. The journey wasn't easy, and there were plenty of sleepless nights, but I wouldn't trade it for anything. I'm not saying it's all smooth sailing now. There are still days where I feel overwhelmed, and there are still risks. But I've learned that success doesn't happen overnight. It's the result of consistent effort, even when you don't see immediate returns. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that the road to entrepreneurship isn't linear. You'll stumble, fall, and doubt yourself, but if you keep pushing forward, you'll get there. If you're thinking about starting something of your own, take the leap. It's scary, but it's worth it. You'll never know what you're capable of unless you try. A couple of years ago, I was sitting in a small, cramped apartment with nothing but a desk, a laptop, and a mountain of overdue bills. I had just turned 30, and my life felt like it was spiraling out of control. I was working as a freelance graphic designer, but the income was inconsistent, and I was barely scraping by. Every day felt like a battle to keep the lights on, and every night I would lay in bed wondering how I got here. I had big dreams growing up, but they all seemed to be fading away as I entered adulthood. One night, while working on yet another client project that barely paid enough to cover rent, I had an epiphany. I had been so focused on getting by that I had lost sight of what I truly wanted to do. My passion was design, yes, but it was more than that. I had always wanted to build something of my own. I had this deep desire to create a product that would not only reflect my skills but also make a difference in the world. Something that would solve a problem for people, something that could make their lives easier. That night, I started brainstorming ideas. I didn't want to just make another app or another tool for designers. I wanted to create something that could change the way people interacted with everyday things. I wanted to create a product that was both functional and meaningful, something that people could use every day, and not just something that would sit on a shelf collecting dust. After hours of scribbling ideas on paper and bouncing concepts off myself, I settled on an idea. It wasn't the most original idea, but it was a problem that I, and many others, faced. I was constantly losing my keys, wallet, and phone every single day. It was maddening. I thought to myself, if I'm dealing with this, there must be thousands, maybe millions, of people who were too. What if there was a way to track these everyday items? What if you could just reach into your pocket or bag and immediately know where your keys or wallet were? That's when the idea for a smart tracker was born. I would create a small, sleek device that could be attached to your everyday items, and it would use Bluetooth to connect to an app on your phone, helping you locate them when they were lost. The more I thought about it, the more excited I got. This could be my ticket to building something real, something that people would actually use. But there was a catch. I had no experience in hardware development. I was a designer, not an engineer. But I wasn't going to let that stop me. I started researching everything I could about Bluetooth technology, hardware prototyping, and product development. I watched endless YouTube videos, read articles, and reached out to anyone who might know more than I did. It felt like I was in over my head, but I was determined. I couldn't let this idea slip away. After a few months of research and self-teaching, I managed to sketch out a rough design for the device. It wasn't perfect, but it was a starting point. I took this design and reached out to some manufacturers. I must have sent over 100 emails, but most of them didn't even respond. The few that did were either uninterested or told me that my idea was too small to be worth their time. I almost gave up a few times, but I kept pushing forward. I knew that if I gave up now, I would regret it for the rest of my life. Eventually, I found a small manufacturer who was willing to work with me. They didn't think my idea would be the next big thing, but they were willing to help me prototype it. We started working on the first version of the tracker, and it was a long and painful process. There were countless iterations, delays, and frustrations. At one point, I thought I was going to lose everything. I had already put up the last of my savings, and if this didn't work, I would be back to square one. But after months of hard work and a lot of sleepless nights, the first prototype was ready. I could hold it in my hand, and it was real. I was terrified. The device worked, but would people actually want it? Would they care enough to buy it? Would it solve the problem the way I hoped? I launched a Kickstarter campaign to raise the funds needed for a full production run. I didn't know what to expect. I had a small following, mostly friends and family, but I didn't have a huge social media presence or a big marketing budget. I poured everything I had into that campaign. I made videos, wrote blog posts, and reached out to influencers who might be interested in the product. The first few days were slow. I barely had any backers, and I was starting to wonder if I had made a huge mistake. But then something unexpected happened. The product started gaining traction. A few tech blogs picked it up, and people started sharing it on social media. The backers started rolling in, slowly at first, but then more and more as the campaign continued. By the end of the month, we had surpassed our funding goal. It was a surreal moment. I had done it. My dream was becoming a reality. From there, things moved fast. The device went into production, and I started receiving orders from all over the world. I hired a small team to help with customer support, marketing, and operations. The business started growing, but with that growth came new challenges. I had to learn how to manage a team, handle logistics, and deal with the inevitable setbacks that come with running a business. There were times when I wanted to quit, when I felt overwhelmed, but every time I looked at the tracker, at the product that had started as a scribble on a piece of paper, I knew I couldn't give up. Fast forward to today, and the business has grown into something I never could have imagined. We've shipped thousands of trackers to customers around the world, and our product has been featured in major tech publications. We've expanded our product line, and I'm now working on new innovations that could further simplify people's lives. It hasn't been easy, and there have been many moments when I doubted myself, but I've learned more than I ever thought possible. I've learned about the importance of resilience, of staying focused on the bigger picture even when the day-to-day is overwhelming. I've learned that failure isn't the end, it's just part of the process. Looking back, it's hard to believe how far I've come. From that small apartment, struggling to make ends meet, to now running a successful business with a growing team and a product that people love. There were moments when I wanted to quit, when the weight of it all felt too much. But I kept going, and now I'm living proof that persistence can turn dreams into reality. If there's one thing I've learned, it's that you can never underestimate the power of a single idea. It doesn't matter if you don't have all the answers or all the resources, you just have to start. You have to take that first step, even if it's terrifying, and trust that you'll figure it out along the way. You don't have to have it all figured out from the beginning. You just need the courage to take the first step, and the rest will follow. So, if you're sitting in a small apartment with no idea where to turn next, remember this: you have everything you need to make your dreams a reality. You just have to keep moving forward, one step at a time. This is the story of how I went from broke and unemployed to running a six-figure business in just 2 years. It wasn't easy, and there were more than a few times I almost gave up. But looking back, I wouldn't change a thing. In the summer of 2019, I found myself stuck. I was in my late 20s, living in a small apartment in a city I didn't really like. I had dropped out of college a few years earlier, unsure of what I wanted to do with my life. I had a string of low-paying jobs and was always scraping by. I was frustrated with myself, constantly comparing my life to people I knew who seemed to have everything figured out. My best friends were on their way to successful careers in law and tech, and here I was, still barely making rent. The tipping point came one morning when I got an email from my boss telling me that the company was downsizing, and I was being let go. I wasn't surprised, honestly. I had seen the writing on the wall for months. But that didn't make it any easier. Suddenly, I was unemployed, living in a city that felt more isolating than ever. At first, I did what anyone would do. I sat around feeling sorry for myself. I watched TV shows I didn't really care about, scrolled through social media, and tried to ignore the fact that I was 28 and completely directionless. But after about a month of doing this, something inside me snapped. I realized that if I didn't make a change soon, I'd be stuck in this cycle forever. I didn't have any grand plans at first, but I knew one thing. I needed to find a way to make money, and fast. I had a few skills that I thought might help. I was decent at graphic design and knew a little bit about web development. So, I decided to start freelancing. The beginning was rough. I set up a profile on Fiverr, hoping to land a few gigs. I spent hours crafting my profile, writing proposals, and trying to convince clients that I could deliver quality work. The first few months were brutal. I got rejected more times than I can count. Sometimes, I'd land a job, only to find out the client wasn't happy with my work, and I'd get a 1-star review. It was discouraging, to say the least. But I kept pushing forward. I also started looking for other ways to bring in income. I tried doing online surveys, signing up for paid research studies, and even selling old clothes on eBay. Nothing really brought in much, but it kept me busy, and I wasn't completely giving up. In the spring of 2020, I took a big gamble. I decided to build a website offering my freelance services, hoping that it would attract more clients than my Fiverr profile alone. It was a lot of work, but I figured if I was going to do this, I might as well try to make it official. I spent weeks learning about SEO, creating a portfolio, and figuring out how to market myself. I didn't have a lot of money to invest in ads, so I focused on content marketing and social media instead. I wrote blog posts about graphic design, shared design tips on Instagram, and even started a YouTube channel where I gave tutorials on web development. Slowly but surely, things started picking up. By mid-2020, I had enough steady clients to support myself. It wasn't glamorous work, but I was able to pay my rent and cover my living expenses. I felt a sense of relief that I hadn't felt in months. It wasn't the dream job, but it was a job, and it was mine. The real breakthrough came when I got a message from a potential client who was interested in redesigning their company's website. They had seen my work online and liked my style. The project was bigger than anything I had done before, but I took the leap and said yes. I poured everything into that project, working late into the night to get it just right. When I finished, I was proud of what I had accomplished. The client was thrilled, and they recommended me to others. By the end of 2020, my business was growing faster than I had ever imagined. I was getting referrals left and right, and my client base was expanding. I was able to hire a couple of subcontractors to help with some of the workload, and my income was finally starting to hit the 6-figure mark. But more importantly, I felt like I was in control of my life for the first time in years. In 2021, I decided to take things to the next level. I launched a second business, a design agency where I could work on larger projects and hire a team of designers and developers. The transition wasn't easy, but it felt like the right move. I had built a reputation for myself, and I was ready to scale. I hired a few talented people and started working with larger companies. We built websites for e-commerce stores, local businesses, and even a few startups. The agency took off faster than I expected, and soon I was managing a team of 10 people. It was exciting, but it was also a lot of pressure. There were times when I questioned whether I had bitten off more than I could chew. But every time I felt overwhelmed, I reminded myself how far I had come, from being unemployed with no direction to running a thriving business. Now, here I am in 2025. I'm still running my design agency, and it's been one of the most rewarding experiences of my life. We work with some amazing clients, and I'm proud of the team I've built. We're expanding into other areas like branding and digital marketing, and I'm more excited about the future than ever before. Looking back, I realize how much of my success was about persistence and not giving up when things got tough. There were times when I doubted myself, when I wanted to quit, and when I felt like I wasn't good enough. But those were the moments that taught me the most. If you're reading this and you're in a similar position, stuck, broke, unsure of what to do next, please know that it's okay to feel lost sometimes. I was there too. The key is to keep going, even when it seems like nothing is working. Keep learning, keep hustling, and most importantly, keep believing in yourself. You never know where you'll end up if you just keep moving forward. I had always dreamed of being an entrepreneur, but growing up, I never had any role models. My parents were hardworking, but they never ventured into business. They worked regular 9 to 5 jobs, came home tired, and lived paycheck to paycheck. I knew from a young age I wanted something different, but I didn't know how to go about it. So, I focused on school, thinking education would be the key to success. After high school, I enrolled in a business degree program. The plan was to graduate, get a corporate job, and eventually climb the ladder. But as I sat through endless lectures about business theory, I started to get frustrated. There was a disconnect between the theory I was learning and the reality I was seeing outside of the classroom. Everyone around me was aspiring to climb the corporate ladder, but none of them seemed to truly understand how business worked on the ground level. One day, while browsing Reddit, I came across a post about a guy who started his own e-commerce store selling custom-made products. He didn't have any venture capital or a fancy education. He simply had an idea, a product, and a ton of grit. The story resonated with me, and that was the moment I knew I had to try something for myself. I didn't want to sit around waiting for the perfect opportunity or a high-paying job. I needed to take action. The first step was figuring out what business I could start. I didn't have any groundbreaking ideas, but I knew there were people out there who needed help with something. I began by looking at the things I loved doing in my free time. One of them was photography. I had a decent camera, and I loved capturing moments for friends and family. But I wasn't sure how to turn this passion into a business. Then it hit me. Why not create a brand that helps people learn photography? I started researching the photography niche. I joined photography groups on Facebook, watched YouTube tutorials, and spent countless hours reading blogs. I quickly realized that there were a lot of people who wanted to learn photography but didn't know where to start. Most of the information out there was either too technical or too expensive. There was definitely an opening for an affordable, beginner-friendly resource. That's when I decided to create an online photography course. I was still in college at the time, so I didn't have much money to invest, but I was determined. I spent every free moment recording videos, creating slides, and writing content for the course. I designed the course in such a way that anyone, even someone with zero photography experience, could pick it up and start taking great photos. It wasn't easy. I had to learn video editing, online marketing, website development, and customer service on the fly. I spent hours each day learning and applying new skills, but I loved every minute of it. When the course was finally ready, I launched it with a simple website and some social media ads. At first, nothing happened. I didn't get any sales, and my website traffic was basically zero. I felt defeated, but I refused to give up. I decided to dig deeper into digital marketing. I took more courses, read more blogs, and followed experts on social media. I learned about SEO, email marketing, and Facebook ads. I used all my knowledge to tweak my website and marketing strategy. Slowly but surely, I started to see results. The first sale was the most exciting moment of my life. It wasn't much, just a $50 course purchase, but it felt like a victory. It meant that someone, somewhere, found my content valuable. I kept iterating, refining, and improving. I made my courses more engaging, created free content to drive traffic, and reached out to influencers in the photography space to collaborate. Within a year, I had my first 1,000 customers. I was ecstatic, but there was still so much to learn. My goal was to make this business sustainable, so I decided to reinvest the profits into scaling the business. Over time, I expanded my product offerings. I created advanced courses for intermediate photographers, added personalized coaching services, and even launched a membership program that provided exclusive content. My revenue grew exponentially, and I began to realize that I was no longer just a college student trying to make it work. I was a full-fledged entrepreneur. The transition from hobbyist to business owner wasn't something that happened overnight, but every small step I took added up. There were plenty of setbacks along the way. I had to deal with customers asking for refunds, negative reviews, and technical issues with my website. At one point, I nearly gave up when my website crashed during a major launch. But I learned from those mistakes and kept moving forward. One of the best decisions I made was to build a community around my brand. I started a Facebook group for my customers to share their photos, ask questions, and support each other. This created a sense of belonging, and it kept people coming back to my courses. It also gave me valuable feedback on how to improve my content and services. My students didn't just want to learn photography, they wanted to be part of something bigger. After 3 years of hard work, my business was making enough money for me to quit my job. I was no longer dependent on a paycheck. I had built something from scratch, and it felt incredible. But as any entrepreneur will tell you, the journey didn't stop there. Running a business comes with its own set of challenges. There were days when I felt like everything was falling apart, and there were days when I felt on top of the world. One of the biggest lessons I learned was the importance of delegation. At first, I tried to do everything myself. But as my business grew, I realized I couldn't do it all. I hired a small team of virtual assistants, a customer support agent, and a marketing consultant. With their help, I was able to focus on the things I was good at, creating content and growing the brand. Today, my business generates multiple six figures in revenue, and I've been able to travel the world, speaking at conferences and workshops about entrepreneurship and photography. I still get excited about the work I do, but the road hasn't been easy. It took years of dedication, learning, and persistence to build something meaningful. But looking back, I can honestly say it was all worth it. If I could give one piece of advice to anyone thinking about starting their own business, it would be this: start now. Don't wait for the perfect time. Don't wait until you feel ready. You'll never feel 100% prepared, and you'll make mistakes along the way. But if you keep going, you'll learn, grow, and adapt. The most important thing is to take that first step, even if it's small. And remember, success doesn't happen overnight. It's the result of countless small actions, failures, and lessons learned. Keep pushing forward, and you might just find yourself building something amazing. Hey, friends, if you enjoy this content, don't forget to like the video and share your thoughts in the comments. We really want to know what you like and what can be improved. What do you think of the video? Are there any topics you'd like to see in future videos? Your feedback really helps us get better. Thanks for being with us. I had always been someone who believed that anything was possible if you put in enough effort. I didn't come from money, nor did I have any rich connections, but I was determined to make something of myself. This is the story of how I turned a side hustle into a full-fledged business and went from being broke and frustrated to running a company that I'm proud of. It all started a few years ago when I was in my mid-20s. I was working a 9-to-5 job that I hated. It wasn't that the job itself was awful. I just felt like I wasn't doing anything that mattered. I worked as a data analyst for a small firm that helped other companies track their sales trends. The pay was decent, but there was no room for growth, and I wasn't passionate about what I was doing. One Friday night, after another long week of spreadsheets and endless meetings, I found myself scrolling through Reddit when I stumbled upon a post about starting an online business. The post was simple. It explained how some people were making passive income by selling products through dropshipping. I had heard of dropshipping before, but I never took it seriously. I assumed it was one of those get-rich-quick schemes that would eventually fizzle out. But something about the post stuck with me. The person who wrote it talked about how they started with just a few $100s, tested their ideas, and learned from their failures. They said that building a business wasn't easy, but the potential was there if you were willing to put in the work. The idea gnawed at me over the weekend. I started reading everything I could about dropshipping, watching YouTube videos, reading blog posts, and listening to podcasts. I quickly learned that dropshipping wasn't a get-rich-quick scheme, but a legitimate business model that could be successful if done correctly. The best part? You didn't need to invest a lot of money up front, and you didn't have to worry about storing inventory. The more I learned, the more excited I got. I decided to take the plunge and give it a shot. I was terrified of failing, but I figured I didn't have much to lose. After all, I was already unhappy with my job, so what was the worst that could happen? I spent the next couple of months researching suppliers, setting up my website, and creating a brand. I chose a niche that I was passionate about: fitness. I'd been working out for years, and I knew that the fitness market was massive. I figured that if I could offer quality products to people who shared my passion for fitness, I could make it work. I spent hours each day after work tweaking my website, running ads, and trying to figure out what products would resonate with my target audience. It wasn't easy. In fact, it was frustrating. For the first couple of months, I barely made any sales. There were times when I wanted to give up. I'd spent money on ads that didn't convert, and the products I thought would sell well didn't move at all. But I kept going. I had a small win here and there, and those wins kept me going. Then, one day, something clicked. I had finally found a product that resonated with my audience. I had spent months refining my ad copy and targeting the right people on Facebook and Instagram. This time, the ads worked. My sales started coming in, and I was ecstatic. I couldn't believe that after all the work, all the frustration, I was finally seeing results. Over the next few months, my business began to grow. I reinvested every penny I made back into the business. I hired a freelancer to help with customer service, and I started testing new products. My website became more polished, my ads became more effective, and my brand started to gain traction. I was still working my full-time job, but my side hustle was becoming a legitimate business. But the real turning point came when I hit a wall with my job. The stress was building up, and I realized I couldn't keep juggling both. My side hustle was making enough money that I could afford to quit my job and focus on the business full-time. It was a scary decision, but it was also one of the best decisions I ever made. I left my job, took a leap of faith, and threw myself into my business with everything I had. At first, it wasn't smooth sailing. I had to learn how to manage my time effectively, handle customer service, deal with suppliers, and constantly find new ways to market my products. But I was in the driver's seat now. I wasn't working for someone else anymore. I was building something that was mine. I also learned that as your business grows, you can't do everything yourself. I had to hire a small team to help with various aspects of the business. I brought on a couple of customer service reps and a marketing manager to help me grow the brand. It was a huge learning curve, but it was also a sign that I was on the right track. The next year was when everything really started to come together. I expanded my product line, started working with influencers, and developed a stronger social media presence. My business wasn't just a side hustle anymore. It was a full-fledged company with employees and a customer base that I was genuinely proud of. Looking back, it's crazy to think about where I started. I went from being a frustrated data analyst with no real direction to running a successful business that I'm passionate about. The road wasn't easy, but it was worth it. The sacrifices I made along the way, late nights, stressful days, and the constant self-doubt were all part of the process. Now, I'm not saying that I'm some sort of business genius. I'm still learning every day. I make mistakes, and I encounter new challenges all the time. But the one thing that has stayed constant is my belief in the power of persistence and hard work. Success didn't come overnight, but it did come because I didn't give up. I know there are a lot of people out there who are just starting their own businesses or are thinking about making the leap. If you're one of those people, my advice is simple: don't quit. It's going to be hard, and it's going to take longer than you think. But if you keep pushing forward, you will see results. It's all about persistence, learning from your failures, and being willing to adapt. Now, I wake up every day excited about the future of my business. It's not just about making money anymore. It's about building something that makes a difference in people's lives. And most importantly, it's about having the freedom to live life on my own terms. So, if you're sitting on the fence, wondering if you should start that side hustle or take that leap, I say go for it. The only way you'll fail is if you stop trying. Keep going, and one day you'll look back at how far you've come and be amazed at what you've built. To everyone who's just starting out or struggling, keep pushing. You got this. I never thought I would be an entrepreneur. Growing up, I was the kid who loved to read books about history and philosophy, not business or tech. My parents were both teachers, and I was always told to follow a stable career path. My life was supposed to be predictable, and I thought I would be a teacher, too, until one phone call changed everything. It was my sophomore year in college, and I was sitting in the library, cramming for a midterm. I had my head buried in a pile of books when my phone rang. It was my mom. I thought she was calling to remind me to eat something, but instead, her voice was shaky, like she was holding back tears. "Your dad's not doing well," she said. "He's been diagnosed with cancer, and the doctors don't know how much time he has left." That phone call shook me to my core. My dad had always been the strong one, the one who never showed weakness. Hearing him in this state, hearing my mom struggle to stay calm on the phone, hit me harder than anything else in my life. I immediately left the library and flew back home to see him. The next few months were a blur of hospital visits, chemotherapy treatments, and family time spent mostly in silence. My dad's condition worsened, and I was forced to reevaluate everything in my life. I realized that life was short, and I didn't want to be stuck in a job I wasn't passionate about. I began questioning everything. Why was I studying something I didn't love? Why was I working so hard to get a degree in something that didn't excite me? I didn't want to end up like my parents, wondering what could have been if they had taken risks earlier in life. In the midst of all this, I started to feel a strange sense of urgency. I didn't want to waste any more time, but I still had no idea what I was supposed to do with this newfound realization. That's when a conversation with my dad changed everything. One afternoon, while he was in the hospital bed, I sat beside him, and we started talking about life. He was weak, his voice barely a whisper, but his mind was sharp. He said something that stuck with me. "Son, you don't need a safety net. You're young. You have the whole world ahead of you. If you don't take chances now, you might never get another opportunity." It was then that I made the decision. I didn't know how or when, but I would find a way to start a business, something that would allow me to create my own destiny. When I returned to school, I switched my major to business. I wanted to learn everything I could about entrepreneurship. I wasn't sure what kind of business I wanted to start, but I knew I had to take the leap. My parents were supportive but worried. They wanted me to get a real job, something stable. I understood their concerns, but I also knew deep down that I was destined for something else. I started researching online, reading articles about people who had started businesses from scratch. I became obsessed with learning the ins and outs of startups. It was around this time that I discovered dropshipping. I had never heard of it before, but after doing some research, I realized that it could be a way for me to start an online business with minimal upfront investment. I dove in headfirst, spending hours late at night watching YouTube videos and reading blogs. I created my first online store, choosing a niche that I thought had potential: fitness accessories. I was passionate about fitness, and I thought that would give me an edge. The first few months were a grind. I had no clue what I was doing. I spent hours tweaking my website, designing ads, and trying to figure out Facebook advertising. Every time I thought I had figured it out, something would go wrong. My first month in business, I made a grand total of $37 in sales. I was ecstatic. I thought I had made it. But then reality set in. I had spent far more than $37 on ads and supplies. I was losing money fast, but I didn't give up. I kept testing new products, running new ads, and learning from my mistakes. Slowly but surely, things started to click. My conversion rates improved, and I started seeing real sales come in. It wasn't much, but it was a start. By my 6th month in business, I was making a steady $2,000 a month. It wasn't enough to quit my job, but it was enough to make me believe in myself. At this point, I decided to go all in. I dropped out of college. It was a terrifying decision, but I knew I couldn't keep splitting my time between school and my business. I told my parents, and they were furious. They didn't understand why I would give up on a safe future to pursue something so uncertain, but I was determined to make it work. The next few years were a whirlwind. I had to learn how to scale a business, manage customer service, deal with suppliers, and market effectively. I struggled through many sleepless nights, doubted myself more times than I could count, and faced countless failures. But through it all, I kept going. Every time I hit a roadblock, I learned from it and found a new way forward. Eventually, my dropshipping business became profitable enough for me to hire my first employee. We started outsourcing tasks, freeing up more of my time to focus on growing the business. I expanded into new niches and began building a brand. It wasn't just about making money anymore. It was about creating something that mattered. I wanted my brand to stand for quality and customer satisfaction. Fast forward to today, and my business generates over $1 million in annual revenue. I now run a small team, and we've built a brand that's recognized in the fitness space. I'm not a millionaire, but I've built something I'm proud of, something that gives me the freedom to live life on my own terms. More importantly, I've learned the value of taking risks and pursuing something I'm passionate about. It wasn't easy, and there were countless times when I thought about giving up. But looking back, I'm glad I didn't listen to the doubts. I'm glad I took that first step and committed to building something from the ground up. To anyone reading this who's considering starting a business or taking a leap of faith, just go for it. You'll never know if you don't try. Don't wait for the perfect moment. It doesn't exist. You're never going to feel ready, but that's okay. The key is to keep moving forward, no matter how small the steps may seem. There will be tough days, but they're just part of the journey. Keep learning, keep failing, and most importantly, keep going. In the end, it's not about the destination. It's about who you become along the way. And I can honestly say, I'm proud of who I've become. Let me take you back to when I first decided to become an entrepreneur. At the time, I was just another guy working a 9 to 5, checking in and out of an office in a cubicle that felt like it was closing in on me. It wasn't that the job was terrible, by all means. I had a steady paycheck, benefits, and my coworkers were decent. But something inside me was stirring, urging me to go after something more. I had a dream, a vision, but I was paralyzed by fear, uncertainty, and the weight of bills I had to pay. But one evening, sitting in the office, mindlessly scrolling through Instagram as I waited for the clock to hit 5 p.m., I stumbled across a post that caught my attention. It wasn't anything revolutionary, just a picture of a small, homemade product someone was selling on their website. But the caption hit me. I started with nothing, just an idea and the courage to go for it. Now, my business makes $50,000 per month. The number seemed so far-fetched, so out of reach, but it ignited a spark inside me. That was it. That was the moment I decided I couldn't let fear rule my life anymore. I had to take that leap, no matter how big the fall might be. I won't lie, the road wasn't easy. My first idea was a complete disaster, and I lost money faster than I could make it. I had this brilliant concept for a subscription box service, a monthly delivery of gadgets and tools for people who like to fix things. I thought it was unique enough to stand out, and I spent weeks, maybe even months, working on the branding, the website, and reaching out to suppliers. When it was finally ready, I hit launch with the kind of excitement and optimism that only a first-time entrepreneur can have. The first month was a bust. I didn't get a single order. Not one. It was devastating, but I didn't give up. After licking my wounds for a while, I realized the problem wasn't the idea, it was the market. I had underestimated how hard it would be to break through the noise. There were bigger, more established players in the field, and they were already crushing it. I wasn't offering anything new or innovative enough to convince anyone to choose me over the competition. I thought long and hard about what went wrong. I spent hours researching trends, reading articles, and watching YouTube videos of successful entrepreneurs who'd gone through the same struggles. One thing became clear. I needed to pivot. It wasn't just about selling things, it was about selling the right thing, something people actually wanted. I had always been passionate about technology. Specifically, I was fascinated by how technology was transforming people's lives. So, after weeks of brainstorming, I decided to shift gears. Instead of selling physical products, I would focus on creating digital content, something I could offer to people looking to learn more about tech, gadgets, and how to integrate them into their daily lives. The decision to move into digital content was terrifying, but it felt like the right one. I started small, creating a blog where I wrote articles about new tech releases, gadget reviews, and tips for tech enthusiasts. It wasn't a massive hit immediately, but people started following me. Slowly but surely, my audience grew, and with that came my first few sales. I sold online courses, ebooks, and eventually created a YouTube channel. The money wasn't huge at first, but it was a start. Then, something incredible happened. A major tech company reached out to me. They wanted me to review their new product. I couldn't believe it. Here I was, just a guy with a blog and a couple of YouTube subscribers, and now I was getting attention from big players in the industry. That was the moment when everything changed. Over the next year, I grew my platform exponentially. I started partnering with other influencers, got sponsored deals, and even began speaking at conferences. I transitioned my side hustle into a full-time business, and before long, I was pulling in 6 figures a year. Looking back, I realized that the biggest lesson I learned in those early days wasn't about how to make money, it was about resilience. The ability to get knocked down and keep going is what separates those who succeed from those who give up too soon. I could have thrown in the towel after my first failed idea, but I didn't. I adapted, learned from my mistakes, and kept pushing forward. What really amazed me was how much I had to grow, not just as an entrepreneur, but as a person. I had to learn everything from marketing to negotiating to customer service. There were nights when I stayed up till 2 a.m. working on a project, only to wake up at 6 a.m. for a meeting. There were moments when I doubted myself and thought I wasn't cut out for this, but every time I felt like quitting, I'd remember the dream I had back when I was scrolling through Instagram. Building a business is not glamorous. The behind-the-scenes stuff isn't always pretty. There's a lot of grind, a lot of sacrifice, and a lot of mistakes along the way. But the rewards? The rewards are incredible. The freedom to make my own schedule, the ability to travel whenever I want, the joy of creating something that resonates with people. These are the things that make the hard work worth it. If you're reading this and wondering if you can do it too, let me tell you that you absolutely can. I was just like you, sitting in a cubicle, dreaming about something more. But the only thing that separates you from success is taking that first step. You won't know everything, and you'll fail a few times, but it's all part of the journey. Trust me, it's worth it. I never could have imagined that my life would change this much. From a small blog to a thriving business, it's been a roller coaster ride. And while there's still so much I wanted to achieve, I can honestly say that I'm proud of how far I've come. If there's one piece of advice I can give, it's this. The key to entrepreneurship is not about having the best idea. It's about being willing to fail, learn from it, and keep going. Don't wait for the perfect moment. The perfect moment doesn't exist. Start now, even if you don't feel ready. Because you'll never feel ready. Success is built by stepping out of your comfort zone and making it happen, one step at a time. Looking back, I can't believe how far I've come. From that first failed business idea to now, I've learned more than I ever thought possible. I'm still learning, still growing, and still building. But I can say with confidence that entrepreneurship has completely changed my life. And if you take that leap, it can change yours too. So, what's stopping you? I never expected a poker game to change my life, but here we are. Back in 2017, I was a 26-year-old graphic designer working freelance out of a co-working space in Austin. My life was simple. Wake up, brew some questionable coffee, knock out client work, and maybe unwind with a Netflix doc or a local dive bar visit. It wasn't glamorous, but it paid rent and gave me the flexibility I liked. Once a month, a bunch of us from the co-working space would get together for a poker night. Mostly chill, $20 buy-in, lots of banter, and cheap beer. One night, a guy I'd never seen before showed up. His name was Raj. He was visiting from San Francisco, working remotely on a stealth startup, a term I'd later learn means still figuring stuff out. Raj was smart, talkative, and lost every hand. But he dropped something in conversation that stuck with me. He mentioned how digital artists were undervaluing their work and how there should be a platform to help them monetize directly without relying on licensing contracts or middlemen. The idea sat in the back of my mind for weeks. I'd spent years chasing invoice payments from clients who thought a logo was just a quick sketch. Raj wasn't wrong. Most creatives I knew had zero leverage when it came to pricing or protecting their work. So, I started poking around. I didn't know the first thing about startups, marketplaces, or even how to build a platform. But I was curious. I emailed Raj, half expecting to be ignored. To my surprise, he responded the next morning, and we met for tacos later that week. I pitched my rough idea. A digital art marketplace where artists could list their work, sell limited licenses, and automate the boring stuff like contracts and payments. Raj lit up. He said he'd actually started something similar the year before but shelved it due to co-founder drama. Maybe it's time to dust it off, he said. 3 months later, we were incorporated. I called it Canvas Club, and I quit freelance cold turkey. Raj handled the back end. I did the design and onboarding. Our MVP was held together with duct tape and code from Stack Overflow, but it worked. We launched with 12 artists, friends, and connections from Behance and Dribbble, who agreed to upload their work and let us try to sell it. The first month? Nothing. Not a single sale. I remember sitting in my apartment, staring at the site like it owed me money. We launched to total silence. It was humbling. I'd assumed that if you built something good, people would show up. That's not how it works. We had to get scrappy. We started running niche Instagram ads targeting digital marketers and indie devs looking for art assets. I wrote blog posts about how to legally use art in your projects and flooded Reddit forums with links, probably annoying a few mods in the process. Slowly, we saw movement. A few sales here and there. Then, one day, a mobile game developer in Finland licensed 20 pieces for $500 total. I remember texting Raj, "We're in business." We reinvested everything. Upgraded the site, built artist dashboards, added Stripe integration. We added tiers for exclusive licenses that expired after X months, which people loved. Revenue hit $5,000 per month by month 8. Not enough to hire, but enough to breathe. Then came COVID. Suddenly, everyone was online. Artists were stuck at home, looking for income. Developers were launching side projects. Our inbox exploded. We onboarded 300 artists in 3 months, and revenue jumped to $30,000 per month. It was chaos. Our servers crashed twice. Raj slept in 2-hour increments. I was doing 14-hour days writing content, answering support emails, and running Zoom demos. We raised a small angel round, $150K from a local tech fund, to stabilize. We hired 2 junior devs and a part-time community manager. The money helped, but honestly, we were drowning in success. Artist disputes, licensing questions, piracy takedowns, it was nonstop. I burned out hard that winter, stopped answering calls, started resenting the project I had once loved. Raj staged a kind of intervention in February 2021. "You need to take 2 weeks off," he said. "Go outside. Touch a tree or something." I flew to Oregon, stayed with an old college buddy, hiked, ate mushrooms, journaled. It sounds cheesy, but I came back lighter. We restructured the company, hired a proper operations lead, and I stepped back to focus on brand and partnerships. In 2022, we hit $1 million in total artist payouts. That was the milestone that made it real. Artists were emailing us saying they'd finally gone full-time. One woman in Portugal told us she bought her first house from the money she earned on Canvas Club. That email wrecked me in the best way. We started getting acquisition offers. Big platforms, stock photo sites, even a music licensing company interested in cross-media expansion. One offered $6 million, all cash. Raj and I argued for weeks. He wanted to take it. I didn't. It nearly killed our friendship. Ultimately, we declined. It just didn't feel done yet. 2023 was brutal in a different way. Growth slowed. New competitors popped up. AI art shook the industry. We got flamed on Twitter for not banning AI-generated pieces. We had to write a whole new policy and build detection tools. Artists left. Others joined. We were in survival mode again, but now we had a team of 9 and real burn. We tightened operations, killed underused features, raised prices, and leaned into our strength community. We launched an annual artist summit, online, for now, and built private Discord groups where artists could trade critiques and collab. That saved us. Engagement went up, and so did retention. Today, Canvas Club does about $85,000 per month. Not unicorn level, but it's sustainable, profitable, and artist-owned. Raj left last year to start something new, and we're still friends. I bought his equity out over time. I still work here, still answer the occasional support email, and still onboard new artists myself when I can. Sometimes I think about the night we met, over cheap beer and bad cards, and how neither of us had a clue what we were doing. But maybe that was the point. You don't always need a 10-year vision or a master plan. Sometimes you just need to show up, listen hard, and be willing to bet on something that doesn't exist yet, especially if the poker table is full. For most of my 20s, I was just kind of drifting. I had a degree in psychology I didn't care about, a job in retail I hated, and a string of failed hobbies I never followed through on. I wasn't lazy, I just couldn't figure out what I actually wanted to do. But then, by accident, I started a business. It started with sourdough, of all things. This was 2020, mid-pandemic, and everyone and their grandmother was making sourdough bread. I didn't even like baking, but I was stuck inside, bored, and needed a hobby that made me feel like I had some control over something. I failed my first 4 loaves. Then the 5th one came out perfect. Golden crust, chewy crumb, the kind of bread that makes you feel like you've tapped into some ancient wisdom. I posted a photo on Instagram. My friends loved it. One DM'd me and said, "I'll give you $10 if you bake me one." I thought she was joking. She wasn't. I baked her a loaf. Then her friend wanted one. Then their friend wanted one. Before I knew it, I was baking 10 loaves a week in my tiny apartment oven. I had no plans to make it a business. I just liked the process, the rhythm of it. But then I had to start keeping track of orders. Then I opened a Venmo for it. Then I gave it a name, Crumb Theory. Still, I wasn't really thinking long-term. I figured it was a fad. People would get tired of it, and I'd go back to retail or whatever. But that's not what happened. A food blogger with 12K followers ordered from me and posted about it. Overnight, my DMs blew up. I had over 200 requests for bread in less than 48 hours. I was working a full-time job and trying to bake at night, which meant 4 hours of sleep and flour in my eyebrows at all times. My landlord even came by once and asked why my apartment smelled like a pizzeria exploded. At that point, I had 2 options: say no to the orders or go all in. I chose chaos. I quit my job. I bought a used commercial oven off Craigslist and convinced a local coffee shop to rent me their kitchen space from 9 p.m. to 3 a.m. The first few nights, I was alone in this big, echoey kitchen, blasting podcasts and trying not to burn anything. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. I officially registered Crumb Theory as an LLC. I built a website. I got labels printed. I made a Google form for orders. Every weekend, I was delivering bread out of the backseat of my '09 Corolla. Some people tipped. Some people asked me to slice it, which I refused to do out of principle. You don't slice good bread until you're ready to eat it. One person even tried to get me to barter a loaf for a massage. By the end of 2021, I was baking 300 loaves a month. I had hired a friend part-time to help with delivery. I was tired, overworked, and the happiest I'd ever been. Then came the problem I hadn't anticipated: scaling. I couldn't keep using a borrowed kitchen. I needed my own space, but commercial kitchens in my city were stupid expensive. I thought about taking out a loan, but I was debt-averse and didn't have much collateral. I considered crowdfunding, but I didn't want to look desperate. So I tried something different, a bread subscription. I called it the Crumb Club. $40 per month got you 2 loaves, delivered. I made it super simple. Local delivery only. 1 savory, 1 sweet per month. I capped it at 100 subscribers to test demand. I launched it in March 2022 with 0 paid marketing, just an email to my existing customers and a few Instagram posts. It sold out in 3 hours. That gave me enough capital to lease a tiny commercial space in an industrial strip next to a gym and a scooter repair shop. It was ugly and had weird vibes, but the rent was doable and I could bake at all hours. I built it out myself with YouTube tutorials and my dad's drill. I painted the walls white and put up posters of different types of sourdough crumb structure. By the end of that year, I had a wait list of 500 people for the Crumb Club. I expanded to 2 part-time bakers and hired someone to help with branding. We started offering workshops on weekends, teaching people how to care for their starters and make their own loaves. We sold starter kits. We got written up in a local magazine. I still didn't feel like a real entrepreneur. I was just a person baking bread who had tricked other people into paying for it. But I realized that's basically what all businesses are. Someone solving a problem with whatever tools they have. My tools just happened to be a dough scraper, a fermentation schedule, and a stubborn refusal to compromise on crust quality. In 2023, we hit $250,000 in revenue. I finally took a week off for vacation. I went to a remote cabin in Maine and didn't bring my starter. It was weird, but peaceful. I thought a lot about what I wanted the next chapter to be. I didn't want to be a national brand. I didn't want to be a franchise. I just wanted to make amazing bread for people who gave a damn about flavor and texture. So I started saying no to expansion offers. I turned down 2 VC emails. Yes, really. I scaled the Crumb Club to 300 max members and left it there. We started a waitlist again. Now it's 2025. We're not huge, but we're thriving. My team is small, scrappy, and weirdly obsessed with hydration percentages. We make killer bread. We teach people how to make their own. We're not just a bakery. We're a tiny bread cult, and I'm proud of that. The weirdest part? That one original friend who offered me $10 for a loaf? She's now our operations manager. Sometimes the thing you do to feel a little less alone during a pandemic turns into your entire life. And sometimes that life tastes like rosemary sea salt and 3-day fermentation. I didn't plan to become an entrepreneur. It just kind of happened, like a bad haircut you try to fix yourself, and suddenly you're a barber. I used to work in logistics at a mid-sized shipping company, managing routes and supply chains. Nothing glamorous. I was making decent money, had health insurance, and could afford takeout 3 times a week. Life was fine, which is sometimes the most dangerous place to be. What changed everything was one awful week. Our department got restructured, which is corporate speak for fired but with extra steps. I got a severance package and a half-hearted handshake. No job, no plan. I was 34 with no kids, no mortgage, and no clue what I wanted. For the first month, I lived on severance and Uber Eats. I thought I'd bounce back fast. Turns out, job hunting with a resume full of supply chain buzzwords wasn't thrilling in a world obsessed with AI and fintech. I was bored and spiraling. Then I had a moment. My neighbor, an old guy named Ray, runs a tiny landscaping business. Just him, his truck, and a handful of regulars. He was unloading a busted weed trimmer from his truck and cursing about how he couldn't find parts. I helped him carry it in, and we got to talking. He said something like, "Used to be, you could fix anything. Now, they just want you to buy new." That hit me harder than I expected. Later that night, I looked up repair services in our area. There were almost none. I remembered growing up in my grandfather's garage, where he fixed everything from toasters to lawnmowers. I thought, what if I opened a repair shop, not just electronics or appliances, but a place where we fixed everything? A kind of modern-day fix-it hub? I called it Patch and Spanner. The first shop was my garage. I spent the last of my severance on basic tools, a website, and some local flyers. I got a logo made for $50 by a graphic design student. My first jobs were small. A guy brought in a broken food processor. Then someone else showed up with an old stereo. I wasn't a pro, but YouTube tutorials and my childhood memories got me far enough. I only charged if I succeeded. Word got around slowly, mostly through Facebook groups and Nextdoor. I offered free pickup and drop-off, which was killer for elderly clients. Every time I fixed something and handed it back, people looked genuinely happy, like I had saved a piece of their life. That kept me going when I was pulling 16-hour days for what amounted to minimum wage. Within 6 months, I couldn't keep up alone. I found a part-time tech student who could solder like a wizard, paid him $20 an hour under the table. Then I hired another. And another. I rented a cheap storefront near a strip mall. It was ugly, but it had parking and space for a front desk. Patch and Spanner became legit. We fixed anything people brought in: blenders, vacuums, leaf blowers, RC cars, lamps, keyboards, even a guy's 1998 Game Boy. Our niche? Emotionally valuable, but economically useless stuff. Things people wanted to fix, not just needed to. We weren't competing with Geek Squad or iFixit. We were in our own lane. A year in, I had 5 employees and was barely breaking even. I was tired, stressed, and sometimes thought about quitting. But then a local paper ran a story on us. The repair shop saving memories. Suddenly, we had a wait list. By year 2, we started offering workshops. Fix It Saturdays. Bring your broken stuff and learn how to fix it yourself. It was part community service, part brand loyalty play. We charged $5 per person, mostly just to cover coffee and materials. It blew up. People loved it. We became a weird kind of local legend. Then came the pivot that changed everything. One of our workshop attendees, a middle-aged woman named Denise, asked if we'd consider doing mobile repairs for senior homes. Most residents couldn't drive, and their families lived out of town. I tried it once. Took a rolling cart, a toolkit, and some batteries, and spent the afternoon fixing remotes and electric razors for a dozen seniors. They adored it. I cried in my car afterward. I branded the service Patch Mobile. We charged a $40 visit fee, plus repair costs. Within 3 months, it was 30% of our revenue. We got a van, wrapped it in our logo, and hit 3 senior homes a week. I started thinking bigger. Applied for a small business grant and got it. We opened a second location across town, hired 2 more techs, and invested in better diagnostic tools. I got out of the garage and into QuickBooks. Eventually, we developed a small inventory of refurbished goods, stuff people gave up on that we restored and resold. Then came a call from someone at a corporate sustainability initiative. A giant company was looking for repair-forward businesses to partner with for ESG, environmental, social, and governance points. I pitched them a plan to host on-site repair fairs for their employees. They loved it. We ran 10 events in the first year, fixing everything from desk fans to Bluetooth speakers in office lobbies. By year 4, we had $1.2 million in annual revenue, 18 employees, and 3 vans. We weren't a unicorn. We weren't SaaS. But we were real. We were profitable. And people genuinely loved us. We were doing meaningful work that made people smile and kept junk out of landfills. I still remember the day I paid myself a 6-figure salary for the first time. I called my mom. She said, "You always were good with broken things." Now, Patch and Spanner is franchising. We've got the playbook, the training modules, the mobile unit designs. I'm working with lawyers and consultants to do it right. Not because I want to get rich quick, but because I believe every town needs a place like this. A place where broken stuff, and maybe broken people, get a second shot. I never thought fixing a toaster would lead me here. But sometimes, the smallest spark lights the biggest fire. When I was 27, I walked out of my cushy marketing job with no backup plan, a shaky bank balance, and a ridiculous idea that I could build something on my own. I didn't even know what that something was yet. All I knew was that every day I sat in that office with its polished floors and clicky keyboards, I felt like I was dying just a little bit inside. This story isn't a fairy tale. There are no overnight successes here. What I built took 5 years, 2 breakdowns, 3 different pivots, and 1 complete wipeout that nearly landed me back at square one. Let's rewind a bit. The startup that finally worked, let's call it Barkboard, wasn't even on my radar in the beginning. I didn't even like dogs. Not then. After quitting, I spent the first month waking up at 11 a.m., binge-watching startup podcasts and trying to convince myself that brainstorming was the same thing as working. I journaled ideas like a marketplace for freelancers and an app that helps people text less and talk more, which, looking back, was just glorified airplane mode. Eventually, I settled on a niche SEO consulting gig for small e-commerce brands. That went okay. I was scraping together enough to pay rent in my tiny Denver apartment. I'd get a couple of clients, optimize their listings, write blog content, and maybe make $2,000 to $3,000 a month. It was more freelance than startup, but it kept me moving. Then something weird happened. One of my clients, a pet toy seller on Etsy, asked if I could help her understand why a competitor's chew toy was getting so much attention. I ran some keyword analysis, and then out of curiosity, I emailed the competitor pretending to be a customer. What I got back wasn't just a product, it was a whole brand experience. They had a QR code on the packaging that linked to a video of a golden retriever playing with the toy. There was a little badge that said vet approved. The website had a rewards program, daily dog tips, and even birthday cards for pets. It clicked. This wasn't just marketing. It was community, loyalty, storytelling. That same night, I bought the domain barkboard.io for $6.29. I didn't fully know what I was doing, but I knew I wanted to build something for dog lovers, an online platform that combined commerce with content and community. I imagined product reviews, personalized recommendations, discussion boards, training resources, and maybe even custom subscription boxes down the line. The first version of Barkboard was hideous. I spun it up on WordPress with a cheap theme and started cold emailing dog influencers to feature their pets on the homepage. I got exactly 0 responses. I pivoted to writing dog health blogs, leveraging SEO skills to rank for long-tail keywords like natural flea remedies for golden retrievers. Within 3 months, traffic started coming in. Nothing massive, maybe 200 visitors a day. But they were dog people. And they were reading. Monetization started with affiliate links. Amazon stuff, collars, treats, brushes. I was making like $100 a month, which at the time felt like passive income heaven. But it wasn't sustainable. In year 2, I built the Barkboard Pack, a subscription box with hand-picked products for dogs, personalized by breed and age. I had no idea how to handle logistics, so I ran the first few batches from my apartment. My living room was filled with squeaky toys, chew sticks, and biodegradable poop bags. I learned quickly that people don't care about your startup journey. They care about their damn dog getting a fun box on time. Growth was painfully slow. Every box I shipped, I was making maybe $3 in profit. I needed scale, but I didn't have money for ads. So I started writing ultra-personalized cold DMs to dog influencers again, this time, micro-influencers with 2K to 10K followers. I offered them free boxes and custom promo codes. A few said yes. That was the real inflection point. When? I never thought selling socks would change my life. This all started during the pandemic, when I was 31, laid off from a mid-level marketing job at a travel tech company. I live in Portland, and like many others during that time, I was pretty broke, burned out, and not exactly feeling inspired. I did some freelance marketing here and there, but it barely paid the rent. I needed something that could scale. My girlfriend and I used to walk every evening just to get outside. And one night, we passed this tiny local shop that had these colorful, patterned socks in the window. For whatever reason, they caught my attention. I joked, I could start a sock company. She laughed and said, "You probably could." That joke became a full-on obsession. I spent the next week researching the sock industry. Turns out, it's more lucrative than I thought. A $6 to $8 billion industry in the US alone. And yet, most of the socks I found online looked the same. Boring. Mass-produced. Or they were fun novelty socks that felt gimmicky. I wanted something in the middle. High-quality, everyday socks with personality, color, and a backstory. I took $500 from my savings, which was basically all I had left, and bought some sample materials online: merino wool, combed cotton, bamboo fiber blends. I watched hours of YouTube tutorials on how socks are manufactured. I joined a couple of Reddit threads and Facebook groups related to fashion startups, manufacturing, and small business logistics. I became that guy who talks about sock elasticity at parties, except there were no parties because, well, pandemic. By February 2021, I had a prototype I was proud of. They were cozy, breathable, and had a colorful yet classy striped design inspired by Oregon landscapes. I called the brand Norththread. Now here's where things got crazy. I cold emailed 73 micro-influencers, people with 10K to 100K followers, mostly fashion, outdoors, and lifestyle niches. I offered to send them free pairs if they'd consider reviewing them. Out of those 73, 12 agreed. Of those 12, 3 actually posted. One of them, a Portland-based hiker with 40K followers, posted an Instagram reel of her opening the package, wearing them on a hike, and talking about how finally someone makes socks that aren't ugly or boring. That reel got like 28,000 views in a weekend. My Shopify store, which I built in one night using a free theme, suddenly had 800 visitors in a day. I made 19 sales that weekend. Small numbers, sure, but to me, it felt like I had just opened a portal to another dimension. People were buying socks that I designed. From there, I reinvested every dollar I made. I found a small US-based manufacturer in North Carolina who specialized in low MOQ, minimum order quantity, custom knitwear. Minimum order was 500 pairs. I begged my brother and a friend to lend me $2,000 total. They did, and I placed my first real order. The manufacturer took about 6 weeks. During that time, I redesigned the website, worked on brand messaging, and doubled down on influencer outreach. By April, I launched what I called Drop 1 3 colorways of our signature hiking sock. They sold out in 3 weeks. Now I was in a rhythm. I'd take pre-orders, use that cash to fund the next round of production, and repeat. I still wasn't profitable in the purest sense. Every dollar went back into the business, but I could see a path forward. I added a newsletter, started posting regular behind-the-scenes videos on TikTok, and even made a silly sock care guide that got shared on Pinterest. 6 months in, I made $27,000 in revenue. For someone who used to have $19 in his bank account, that was everything. But it wasn't all sunshine. I had supply chain issues. A batch came out the wrong size due to a miscommunication with the manufacturer, and I had to refund 130 orders. That hurt bad. Then USPS lost a big shipment during the holidays, and customers were fuming. I spent Christmas Eve on customer support calls. Around that time, I nearly quit. My girlfriend, now fiancée, reminded me why I started, not to get rich quick, but to build something of my own. So I swallowed my pride, refunded everyone I could, and wrote a super honest email to my list explaining what had happened. That transparency actually led to more customer loyalty than I expected. One guy even replied, "Man, this is why I buy from small businesses." Respect. By early 2022, I hit my first $100,000 in lifetime revenue. I had 3 part-time contractors helping with customer support, inventory, and social media. I added crew socks, ankle socks, and a subscription model for Socks of the Month, which, weirdly, became our best seller. Then came the break I didn't see coming. An editor from a gear review site emailed me. She'd gotten a pair as a gift and asked if we'd send more for a spring hiking gear review. We did. 2 weeks later, we were on a list titled Top 10 Best Hiking Socks for 2022. Sales doubled in a week. I cried. No shame. I cried real tears. That summer, we crossed $250,000 in total revenue. I moved everything out of my tiny apartment and into a shared warehouse space with 2 other indie apparel brands. We split shipping costs and bonded over how insane this life was. We started doing pop-ups at farmers markets and local festivals. Turns out, people really like talking about socks when they can touch them. By mid-2023, I hit a milestone that felt completely unreal, $500,000 in revenue. I paid myself a full-time salary for the first time in 3 years. Not massive, but enough to feel human again. This year, 2024, we're on track to cross $1 million. I've got 5 employees. We expanded into running socks, office casual socks, and even did a limited collab with a local brewery, Beer Plus Socks. Somehow it worked. And the best part? People love the brand. Not just the socks, but what we stand for: comfort, color, local production, and transparency. We donate 5% of profits to Oregon Wilderness Conservation, and that's something I'm deeply proud of. If you're reading this thinking of starting something, here's what I'd say. Start ugly. Launch before you're ready. Don't waste months perfecting a logo. Talk to your customers like real people. Show your face. Own your mistakes. Be obsessed with your product. And above all, keep going, even when it feels like no one cares. I went from unemployed to running a sock brand that employs people, gives back to the community, and pays my bills, all because of a joke during a walk. Socks. Who knew? Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel so you won't miss new videos. Also, leave a comment. I'd love to hear your thoughts. Your support and engagement mean a lot to me. See you in the next video.